Story 1. The Trail That Wasn't on the Map. Kieran woke up at 1 a.m. to footsteps outside his tent. Not animal footsteps, not the random crack of a branch or something small moving through leaves. Two-footed, slow, deliberate, moving along the tree line toward him. He had been hiking solo for 3 years before this night. He knew what a forest sounded like at 1 a.m. He knew the difference between a deer pushing through undergrowth and something walking with intention. He had spent hundreds of nights outdoors learning exactly that difference. This was walking, unhurried and certain, and heading in his direction. He lay completely still inside his sleeping bag, hands flat at his sides, listening. The footsteps were moving along a narrow trail he had noticed earlier that evening, barely a foot wide, cutting through the undergrowth about 30 feet north of his campsite and disappearing into the trees in both directions. He had paused when he saw it, had thought about whether 30 feet was enough clearance from a game trail, had decided it was fine and moved on. He was thinking about that decision differently now. The footsteps slowed as they approached the campsite, then a flashlight beam swept low across the nylon wall of his tent. Deliberate, scanning, moving across the full width of the tent and holding there. He did not move, did not reach for his own light, barely breathed. The beam passed. The footsteps continued south, moved past the campsite, and faded into the trees. He exhaled slowly. Okay, somebody out late. A ranger maybe. Another hiker on an unmarked path he hadn't known about. It happened. People moved through backcountry at strange hours for all kinds of reasons. He was almost relaxed. Then the footsteps stopped. Complete silence. He counted to 60. Nothing moved. He told himself whoever it was had kept going. That sound in a forest at night did strange things, that stopping didn't mean anything. Then the flashlight came back. Same direction, same low beam. But slower this time. Much slower, moving back toward the campsite, stopping just outside his tent. The beam held still on the tent wall for a long time. 10 seconds. Maybe more. Kieran's mouth went dry. He reached for his own flashlight. His hands, to his mild amazement, were steady. He called out, gave his name, said he was a solo hiker, asked if everything was okay out there. Nothing. No voice, no shift in the beam, no sound of anyone repositioning or preparing to answer. Then the beam went out all at once. He unzipped the tent fast and stepped outside with his light on. The trail was empty in both directions. He swept 30 feet each way, then 50. Nobody. No shape moving between the trees. No sound of footsteps retreating. Nothing. He crouched and examined the ground along the trail. The earth was soft from rain 2 days earlier. Perfect conditions for holding footprints. There were none, not in either direction, not a single impression. He stood there for a long time with the flashlight pointed at a trail that had just been walked, turning the facts over, trying to find a configuration that made sense. He couldn't find one. He went back inside, did not sleep, lay on his back with the flashlight in his hand and listened to the forest until the sky started to lighten. He kept replaying it, the beam holding still on his tent for 10 full seconds, not passing, not sweeping, just holding. Like something on the other side deciding what to do. In the morning, before he had fully registered what he was looking at, something made his stomach drop. The trail was closer than he remembered. He stood at the tent entrance and looked at it. 12 feet away, maybe less. He had set up camp with 30 feet of clearance. He had measured it deliberately because he always did. 30 feet was the number in his head, clear and certain. He walked to the edge of the trail and counted his steps back to the tent. 12 steps. He counted again. 12 steps. He stood there and looked at his tent and looked at the trail and looked at the tent again. He had not sleepwalked. He had not relocated the tent in the night. He had not done anything to change the distance between those two things. He stood at the edge of that narrow path for a long time, looked in both directions along it, listened to the forest going about its morning business, completely indifferent to what he was trying to process. He packed everything without eating breakfast, left 2 hours ahead of schedule. At home, he spent the better part of an evening pulling up every map he could find for those exact coordinates. Forest Service maps, topographic overlays, satellite imagery going back nearly a decade. The clearing was visible in every single image. The trail was not visible in any of them. He checked for almost 2 hours before he stopped. He has never returned to that forest. And he told me the thing he cannot stop returning to is not the footsteps and not the flashlight that held on his tent for 10 full seconds. It's that the trail moved. He knows how that sounds. He stopped caring about how it sounds a long time ago. Story 2. She heard her name. Mara heard her name at 2:47 a.m. and her first thought was that she had dreamed it. Her second thought, half a second later, was that she hadn't. Mara, low, quiet, patient, from somewhere in the trees about 60 feet from her tent. Spoken the exact way you say someone's name when you know they can hear you and you are giving them the chance to respond. She had chosen this campground specifically because it felt safe. Blue Ridge Mountains, well-reviewed, moderately busy through the summer season. It was her first solo camping trip and she had done everything right. Told 3 people where she was going, picked a reputable site with good reviews, arrived in full daylight, had the tent up and dinner cooked before the light faded. She was 29 and careful, and not someone who frightened easily. She lay still and went through the rational explanations immediately. A nearby camper, talking in their sleep. Sound moving unusually through the tree line and distorting a word from somewhere further away. Her own name surfacing from a dream she could no longer remember. She breathed slowly, waited. 50 seconds. Then it came again, from a different position. Further west, as if whatever had said it was moving slowly and quietly through the trees, following a line parallel to the campground in no particular hurry. Mara, same tone, same patience, not loud, not urgent, not frightened, just certain. She turned her phone screen off immediately. No light through the tent walls. She moved to the far side of the sleeping pad, put her back against the tent wall, and kept her hand on the zipper without pulling it. She sat like that for 40 minutes. Her legs started to ache. She did not move them. Nothing came closer. Nothing touched the tent. No further sound. She thought about unzipping, about calling out, about grabbing her keys and walking quickly to the parking area without running, because running felt like it would change the nature of whatever was happening in a way she didn't want to risk. She did none of those things. She stayed still and waited. At some point she realized she'd been holding her breath and made herself exhale slowly. Then she heard the footsteps, not close, not at the edge of the campsite. Deeper in the trees to the west, moving slowly, not toward her, just moving. Back and forth at a measured pace, quiet and deliberate. Walking in the trees at 3 a.m., she counted the steps, even unhurried. Then they stopped. Silence came back so completely she could hear her own pulse. She did not move for another 20 minutes. When daylight finally started to show through the mesh, she unzipped and walked the campsite perimeter carefully. Nothing. No footprints she couldn't account for. No disturbed ground near the tree line. No sign that anyone had been in those trees at all. She packed faster than she needed to and told herself she was just getting an early start. On the way out, she stopped at the camp host station, tried to make the question sound casual, asked whether there had been any unusual activity overnight anywhere in the campground. The host, a woman in her 60s with the measured calm of someone who had been in one place a very long time, looked at Mara for a moment before answering. "Which site were you in?" Mara told her. Something shifted in the woman's expression. Not surprise, not alarm. Something more like a recognition that had been resting quietly and had just been woken up. "You're not the first person to ask me that," she said. "About that site specifically." Mara waited. The woman seemed to make a decision. "The guest before you. One before that." A pause that went on just a beat too long. "Always that site." Mara asked what had happened to them. The camp host looked at her steadily. "Drive safe," she said, and looked away. Mara wanted to ask more. She could tell there was more. She could see it in the way the woman's jaw had tightened slightly before she said drive safe, in the way she had not asked what had happened, or offered any comfort, or shown any surprise at all. like someone who had heard this specific conversation enough times that the surprise had worn off years ago. But the woman had already turned back to what she was doing, and the conversation was over in a way that felt deliberate, like someone who had decided a long time ago exactly how much they were willing to say. Mara has camped many times since that trip, always with at least one other person. She has never returned to the Blue Ridge. She told me the thing she cannot get past is not what she heard. It is the direction it moved. Both times her name came from a different position in the trees. It was not standing in one place. It was moving slowly through the woods, circling her campsite at a distance, unhurried, like something that already knew she wasn't going anywhere. Story 3, The Man at the Tree Line. David saw the figure at 3 a.m. and watched it for a full minute before he understood what was wrong with it. He was an experienced wilderness guide. 30 years in the Montana backcountry, he had managed bears at close range, navigated whiteout conditions on exposed ridgelines, and kept panicking groups calm in situations that genuinely warranted panic. He was not someone who frightened easily. He stated this as plain fact, without any pride in it. But the figure at the edge of the meadow frightened him. He had woken up to check the sky, a habit on clear nights, and unzipped the tent to find it standing at the far tree line. Tall, dark clothing, no pack, no headlamp, no gear of any kind. Facing his campsite directly, completely, unnaturally still. He had chosen this site specifically for the open fourth side, the wide meadow with nothing between him and the tree line, no blind angles. If anything was coming, he would see it long before it arrived. He had camped here over a dozen times for exactly that reason. He watched the figure for 60 seconds without looking away. It did not shift its weight, did not adjust its arms, did not look around or move its head, did not breathe in any way that was visible from where David crouched in the tent entrance. Everything alive moves. Even standing perfectly still, a person shifts, adjusts, sways slightly, breathes. You can see it. David could see none of it. He called out, gave his name, said he was a guide camping in the clearing, asked in a clear, level voice if the person across the meadow needed any assistance. Nothing. He raised his flashlight and swept the beam across the meadow toward the tree line. The figure was gone. He had not looked away. The sweep took 2 seconds. He sat in the tent entrance and stared at the empty tree line and did not move for a long time. He told himself a hiker had come out of the trees, seen the tent, turned back into the forest before the flashlight reached them. Reasonable, possible, a thing that happens. He repeated this to himself every 30 minutes until daylight. In the morning he went to pack up and stopped. His compass was on the ground 3 feet from his pack. He had left it on top of his pack the previous evening. He always did. It was automatic, a habit from years of guiding. Same place every time. It was on the ground, placed carefully. Not dropped or knocked over. Needle aligned, pointing north, like someone had picked it up, checked it, and set it down deliberately. He picked it up and looked north across the meadow toward the tree line. His hands were not steady. He stared at the compass for a long time. Then he put it in his pocket, picked up his pack, and left without eating breakfast. He drove the first 2 hours home on autopilot, barely aware of the road, running it through his head. The figure, the stillness, the sweep of the flashlight, the compass on the ground. He pulled over twice, not because of traffic, because he needed to stop moving and think carefully about what he had seen and what he knew and what he could honestly say he was certain of. He was a man who had built his life around being certain, around knowing the difference between what he had observed and what he had assumed. He applied that discipline now, carefully, the way he always did. He had spent 30 years developing a calm and rational approach to unusual things in the wilderness. He applied it now. He could not make it add up. The figure could be explained. Barely, but it could be. A hiker in dark clothing who turned back before the light reached him and stepped quietly into the trees. Possible. The compass could not be explained. He had not dropped it. He was certain of that. He had placed it on top of his pack the way he always did, and he had not touched it again. In the morning, it was on the ground, 3 feet away, pointing north. Placed, not dropped. He has thought about it for years, and he cannot find a version of events that works. David still guides groups into the backcountry. He has never taken anyone to that campsite again. When people ask why he prefers other locations in that area, he gives practical reasons about elevation and drainage. He told me the compass is the detail he always leaves out when he talks about that night. Not because it isn't real, because it changes the story in a way that is harder to hold. The figure disappearing is frightening. He has held that for years. But the compass means it did not just stand at the tree line and watch him from a distance. It came close enough to touch his things, and he never heard it arrive. Story 4. What knocked on the cooler? Priya woke at 2 a.m. to 3 slow knocks. Even, patient, from the direction of the cooler she had left 10 feet from the tent door. She lay still, listened. 3 more knocks. A pause of several seconds. 3 more. She had camped for 11 years with her husband before he died. She knew every sound a campsite made at night. Raccoons scratched and chattered and knocked things sideways. Bears were unmistakably large and purposeful. Smaller animals skittered and moved constantly, always making more noise than just the single thing they were doing. This was not any of that, only the knocking, precise, evenly spaced, surrounded by complete silence on all sides. No scratching before it. No sound of anything approaching or repositioning between sets. No other movement of any kind. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 knocks. A pause. Like something that understood waiting, that knew how long to leave between attempts. She grabbed her flashlight and unzipped the tent in one motion, swept the beam across the campsite. The cooler sat exactly where she had left it, undisturbed, latch still closed. The area around it completely empty and still. She checked under it, behind the log she used as a seat. Nothing. She stood in the tent doorway with the flashlight on the empty campsite and took stock of herself. Heart going fast, breathing short, legs wanting to do something but not sure what. She made herself breathe slowly and look at everything carefully. Then the knocking came again. 3 knocks, from inside the cooler. She did not open it. She stood in the doorway and looked at the cooler for a long moment and felt the specific kind of fear that does not make you run, but makes you completely motionless. She thought about her husband, about all the nights they had set that same cooler in that same spot and gone to bed without giving it a second thought. She did not know why she thought about that in that particular moment, but she did. Then she picked up the cooler, carried it inside the tent, placed it against the far wall, sat with her back to the tent door and watched it until daylight. She heard nothing else all night. This was her first solo trip since her husband had died 8 months before. She had chosen their favorite site because familiar ground seemed right. She had cooked the first night meal they had always made together. She had cried quietly by the fire and then felt, for the first time in a very long time, something close to peace. She had been okay when she went to bed. She did not feel okay now. In the morning, she opened the cooler in full daylight and examined it carefully. Food undisturbed, ice still solid, nothing inside that could have produced either sound. On the inside of the lid, in a horizontal line across the center, there were 3 small marks, evenly spaced, each one the size and shape of a knuckle pressed from the inside outward. She has photographs. She has shown them to people she trusts. No one has produced an explanation that holds together. She told me she does not use the word supernatural and is not using it now. But she said the thing she cannot resolve is not the knocking from outside, it is the knocking from inside, because the cooler had been latched all afternoon and all evening. Whatever made those marks from the inside was in there before she ever left for the campsite. She went back to that campsite the following spring. Same site. The trip was completely quiet. No knocking, no sound she couldn't explain. She slept through both nights and drove home without incident. She told me she is not sure whether that made things better or worse, because a quiet return means it might just be over, or it means it already has what it wanted, that it doesn't need to knock anymore. She said she prefers not to think too hard about which of those is more likely. Story 4. What knocked on the cooler? Ren noticed the breathing on the 5th night, not suddenly. Gradually, the way you become aware of a sound that has been there for a while before you consciously register it. She was almost asleep when she realized it had been going on outside the tent wall for several minutes already. right beside her, close to where her head was resting against the sleeping pad. Slow, deep, even, the rhythm of something completely at rest. Wren had been solo backpacking since she was 22 and had never stopped. She had logged more nights alone in the wilderness than most people manage across an entire lifetime of trying. She kept detailed journals. She was methodical and precise and constitutionally skeptical of anything she could not verify directly. She lay still and told herself it was a deer. Deer were quiet. Deer were curious. A deer could stand beside a tent for a long time. She told herself this at regular intervals for 2 hours. The breathing did not shift, did not investigate, did not move around the tent the way an animal moves when it is interested in something. It stayed in one position and breathed slowly and completely and without any sign that it was concerned about being heard, like something that had settled in for the night and was entirely comfortable. Then, without any sound of departure, it stopped. No footsteps leaving. No movement through the undergrowth. No sound of anything going anywhere at all. There, and then not, with nothing between those two states. She lay still for a long time after it stopped, wide awake, listening to the forest do its normal things around her. She did not pack out immediately. She lay there until full daylight, going through everything she knew about nocturnal animals in the Pacific Northwest, their sizes, their sounds, their behaviors near campsites. She was systematic about it, because being systematic was how she handled things. She could not land on anything that fit. A deer breathing that slowly and that close and that still for 2 hours. Not moving, not investigating, just breathing. She could not make that fit. She sat up and looked at the tent wall where the breathing had been. Just fabric, just nylon, nothing visible. She packed methodically and deliberately, the way she always did. She was not going to let herself run. She was not going to give it that. She drove home, 5 hours, unpacked, showered, ate something, slept in her own bed on the 3rd floor of her building for 2 nights without anything unusual happening. She was nearly done putting the whole thing into the category of things that feel worse in the moment than they actually were. On the 3rd night, she woke at exactly 3 a.m., breathing outside her bedroom window. She lay still and listened, and for one moment told herself she was still dreaming. She was not dreaming. 3rd floor, no balcony on that side of the building, no ledge wide enough to stand on, no fire escape, no external surface of any kind outside that window that could support any living thing. Slow, deep, even, the same rhythm. She lay still for a long time before she moved. Part of her understood that getting up would make it real in a way she was not certain she was ready for. She got up anyway, walked to the window slowly, in the dark. The breathing stopped the moment she got close. She stood at the glass and looked out at the street 3 floors below. Empty, still, 3 in the morning. She reached out and put her hand on the glass. The outside surface was fogged, a patch directly in front of where she was standing. The rough size and shape of something pressed close against the glass, breathing against it. She stood there and watched the condensation slowly clear. She watched the fog thin at the edges first and then fade toward the center. The shape of it, the size of it, the way it was positioned directly in front of her face, at the exact height of something standing just on the other side of the glass. She did not feel the way you feel when something has a simple explanation. She called me the next morning. Calm, precise, told me every detail twice, then she said she was not going to guess what it was. She had thought about it for 2 years and still did not know and had made her peace with not knowing, but there was one thing she was completely certain of. Whatever had been outside her tent in that forest in northern Washington had not stayed behind when she left. It had followed the same roads, found the same city, the same building, the same window on the 3rd floor, and breathed against the glass at 3 a.m. so she would know it had arrived. She moved apartments 3 weeks later. She still camps alone. She told me the wilderness had given her too much over too many years to let one thing take it from her. She refuses to let it win on that. But she told me something else, something she said she had not told anyone else. On the night she moved into the new apartment, the very first night, she woke at 3 a.m. She lay in the dark, completely still, listening, silence, her new building, her new street, different sounds, a different city block entirely. Nothing outside the window. She exhaled. Then she got up and checked anyway, because she understood now that not checking was not something she was going to be able to do anymore. The window was clear. No fog, no condensation, no sign of anything outside. She stood there for a moment and looked at the empty glass. Then she went back to bed. She told me she does not know if that night was the end of it or just a pause. She has learned to be okay with not knowing, but she still checks the windows. Every single night, without exception. New apartment, a hotel room, a friend's couch. It doesn't matter. She checks, because she learned that night that distance means nothing, that walls mean nothing. That the only thing between her and whatever found her in that forest is a pane of glass. And she needs to know what is on the other side of it, every night, wherever she is. 5 people, 5 nights alone in the dark, 5 things that did not behave the way things are supposed to behave. The wilderness is not empty. It never was. Good night. Subscribe for more late night stories, a new one every week.